Here we go. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to some of you on the East Coast. This is Coach Dave live with Ben Boudreaux down in Georgia. Or no, wait, are you in New Orleans right now? Or are you in
I'm
Georgia?
in New Orleans right now, actually,
All right.
still.
In New Orleans. You're not on Bourbon Street, so that's good.
No, well, I think given with our issue right now, probably not.
But again, very happy to have you. So we're going to get started. And again, very thankful for you to help or to not only to be here, but and I guess, yes, help in some way, because I think you're going to be able to provide some incredible insight for professionals, for families, and for many of others that are on the autism spectrum. So again, I thank you for sharing your story about what you're about to share. But I think I got to give everyone the context of and to set up the scene of how you and I met. I believe we were in, was it Florida?
Yes, it was at Orlando for last year at the American College of Sports Medicine meeting.
Yeah, so I gave a presentation with actually Susanna Dillon, who was recently on the show, and another Sean Healy at ACSM's annual meeting, their exercises medicine annual conference,
Yep.
World Congress meeting. And at the end of it, Ben comes up to me, and as you guys have probably already seen, is all smiles and tells me his story, mainly that he has autism, and tells me about how he is in his doctorate level program at the University of Georgia. And I begin to ask him questions, which I'm going to get to. But and that's how we met, and we've stayed in contact since. And when we started doing this show, I can obviously think of no one better to share this information, to share his personal experience with not only autism but exercise, and how this information is so valuable for the autism community, for the professionals helping them, and for the many families of other children impacted. So it's my pleasure, my honor to introduce Mr. Ben Boudreaux. So thank you again for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
So Ben, I think many questions, and again, we're going to be 30 minutes today. And if we have to bring you on the show, again, I absolutely will. If people definitely type in your questions, and if we can get to them, we are going to. But I think, first and foremost, I'm sure you've gotten this, but, when were you diagnosed? And yeah, let's just start there. So when were you diagnosed with autism?
So it's kind of an interesting story. So I actually was in third grade when my teacher started recognizing that. I started usually a teacher would write notes on the board, and well, she started realizing you're not really writing notes and your cognitive skills are not on par. Mm-hmm. Okay, so she relays the information to my parents, and immediately I have my mom was like, okay, maybe, we need to probably start looking into this. My dad was like, well, there's not really, not much wrong. Well, they get me tested. Now, they did a big psychological and educational evaluation at a local hospital here in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. Well, they did a basic testing, and then they found that I actually had a form of disorder of written expression, a little bit of dyslexia. Mm-hmm. Now, flash forward, they're like, okay, so the big thing they mentioned is get him into a different school, maybe see if you can get one-on-one instructions. Well, they contacted the school, and the school said, well, you're in a classroom of 30 students, and we don't have the time because of a one-on teacher to communicate with this.
Mm-hmm.
So they advised, okay, well, go for a different school. So I go into my mom did a big search of what educational background can actually do this. And they found one school that I've went from 4th grade all the way up to 12th grade. So, but interestingly, the diagnosis of autism didn't get diagnosed until 8th grade, actually, when I started experiencing bullying, psychological depression, anxiety. Then they started realizing, okay, he's not fitting in socially, so something's off.
Mm-hmm. So when you're, and I'm not meaning to not address the bullying and everything. And I can only imagine how difficult and challenging that was, not only for you, but I'm sure also for your family and your parents. I want to ask you about your parents. So at 3rd grade, this comes about, and because there's probably a lot of newer parents that our kids are just diagnosed. Unfortunately, still to this day, right? Listening and hopefully listening. But what did the doctors, or was there any negativity brought upon the people who were diagnosing you, whether it was 8th grade or 3rd grade? And how did your parents deal with some of that? Or how did they keep positive, or how did you keep positive at those points?
So again, like both my parents were divided. So my dad, because my parents have been divorced since I was 2 years old. So my dad believed initially at the time, is saying there's nothing wrong with my child. He's totally normal. My mom's like, well, they started experiencing 8th grade that, okay, maybe he needs to get on medication. Like now we need to start getting interventions going on. Well, my mom said, okay, well, I still will tell people to this day, I say, is when I was young, I in quotes said, I don't want to be one of those young kids that goes to the front office and has to take medication. And that kind of stuck for a while. So my mom said, well, okay, then you're going to go do counseling instead once a week. So we'll do that. And then later on, they started recognizing other things started impacting that, okay, maybe you really do need to get on medication. Maybe there's other things you need to do, but they were still not very observant, and my mom wasn't very understanding of what more other things she can actually do. Mm-hmm. Because eventually it led into what other things like exercise can maybe actually benefit me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if you're just joining us, again, I'm here with Mr. Ben Boudreaux. He's sharing his story and his background of being diagnosed with autism. But the other thing too, I think that's more apparent, and what we want, whether you're an exercise professional in the field of working with those with autism, or a parent listening, is Ben is soon to be a doctor at doctorate level from the University of Georgia. So I think this is a very inspiring, important message that he is going to share, specifically of how exercise played a role in his development. And so with that said, Ben, I guess my next question then is, so growing up, at 3rd or 8th grade during that diagnosis, typically a lot of parents or the kids with autism are put into, as they should be, if they need it, is OT or PT. And many parents see that as the only way that they're supposed to be getting exercise or movement. So were you put in OT or PT?
I was actually not. So the doctors recommended it because I started having bad posture, like hunching over more, feelings of okay, well, and then plus my mom said, well, we don't have enough hours because I am a full working single mother, and then against a father. So it's like, when do we have the time to do this? But then my mom was like, well, what if we did swim, do like, I was part of a swim team. So
Mm.
it's kind of an individual thing. And then she noticed that, okay, well, that's maybe benefiting him at a young like age, that, maybe there's a benefit to it.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you about swimming here in a minute. But so before we get into that, though, so you weren't involved in OT and you weren't involved in PT. When you were, whether it was third grade or when you had that diagnosis of autism in eighth grade, then were you involved in physical education or adapted physical education?
Physical education. So I was in a very small school. Like, for my senior year, I only graduated with 40
How
people.
many?
So it was 40.
Okay.
So it's very small. Like, they didn't have all the resources in the world to, like, have mandate, like developing an APE program or all these different interventions. So maybe, but I wasn't very engaged during PE because it's team sports. I was dealing with, the social aspect again. And then I was like, well, I did do soccer for a year, but hated it. I didn't do it. I didn't do any high school sports.
So, okay. So this is great stuff because I think these are things that I know I've say to parents or I say to professionals, and you're starting to say some things I want to ask you about. So, okay. So team sports, I've said this for years. I've said the biggest challenges with sports, while not every kid or every adult with autism, they may love sports and that may be their go-to for physical activity. But for many, I've said, is sports involves two of the most challenging things for those with autism: communication and social skills, right? And
Correct.
so when you said this about you didn't like team sports, what was it? Those two things? Was it communication and social skills that was, or what all was it that was
I
making it
think it was
difficult?
I think it was both communication and social skills,
Mm-hmm.
because it was more like, how do I, like, I felt at the time is, how do I fit in? How do I become the quote unquote normal, like be fit in with, everyone else? But then also it's like the social, like, social skills is like, okay, now that I fit in normal is like, I don't have, like, I can't catch a baseball. Like, basically my motor skills of hand-eye coordination is not, terrible. So I have the history of getting picked last all the time.
Oh, okay. So give me, if you had difficulty catching a ball, you're in a general physical education setting. Um, did these physical education teachers know you were diagnosed on the spectrum? And if so, or if not, what did they do to help you catch that ball, or did they not do anything?
They did not do anything. So they would just, my PE teacher would just like say, give people, here's the ball, do what y'all want to do, play a game or whatever. And, most of us, like, I was the type that, would sit on the bench all the time, talk to other people. And, I was very secluded to myself. Like, when I go home, I just play video games all day. I didn't want to care for exercise. It was boring. It hurts, what's the point? And then plus when my mom tried to bring,
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
like, for instance, when I went to the gym for the first few times when I was younger, my mom would say is, well, okay, gym doesn't work. The gym is the most intimidating place if you have autism or not. Like, people are afraid that, oh, this person's very, fit, and they're going to start staring at me because I'm doing a particular exercise wrong. Well, even with my diagnosis and over time, I've noticed is even some people in the gym, they don't know what they're doing, even though they've been to the gym for a period of time. So it's like, you don't know until, so it's like, okay, now you're developing the confidence that, okay, well, there's certain aspects that, okay, well, it's not intimidating, but it's like, okay, well, even to this day, I still do not look in the mirror when I work out.
Okay. So That's hilarious, because again, if you're just joining us, Ben is about to become a doctorate level in exercise science, right? A doctor in exercise science. Is that the right
Exercise
thing?
science. Yep, exercise. So it's a doctorate in kinesiology with a specialty, the specialist more in exercise science. But I'm more of like a behavioral
Okay.
person. So I'll go into more detail later. Is
Okay.
studying of how people's behaviors are during physical activity and throughout the day.
But here's what Ben said is, like, a lot of people go to the gym, they don't know what they're doing, and he's absolutely right. But here's the other piece of that, which has bothered me for years, continues to, or even with this, you're seeing a lot more professionals trying to get or want to work with the special needs community, and you're seeing more people also starting certifications and doing things to help those with special needs. But the problem is many of the trainers at the gyms don't have a great education that even people are paying hundreds of dollars per hour to go to, let alone now you've got other people across the country trying to start these autism or these other certificates, and they don't even have that foundational level of exercise. And I'm not saying, and here, that's why I spent so long with ACSM, because they are the world's leading exercise science organization to create the certificate. I'm certified through ACSM as well, and I have a college degree. But again, what you're saying, Ben, is, yeah, I think what I'm hearing is, if you're someone with autism listening to this, yes, it can be an intimidating place, a gym, but that also may be the spot where you can best make the exercise connection, because it's not going to be involved in sport. Or you had a bad experience like Ben did when he was a kid, where he was put on the sideline and just wasn't even assisted to how to catch a ball. And parents, listen up. This is still happening today to your children, or to your children or the students with autism or other special needs. Teachers don't know. And this is why we had Susanna Dillon
And I can
on.
actually
Go ahead.
And I can chime in on that, even in the academia setting, that and I still have people to this day. Like, I had someone tell me that I don't want to say names, but during my undergrad, I had people say, I don't know what autism is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to do. Oh, and they have a master's in education. You don't know what it is, and you're telling me this, but you don't know what it is. But the thing is that there's this educational thing, is that a good person, like I'm told in research, you got to do your homework, learn about it, or don't be afraid to ask questions, like, to the person that, I always tell people, be perfectly honest with me. I will not be upset with you. It's not going to hurt my feelings. It's
Right.
just how I learn. So some of us need to, we're going to do something that's out of that normal, and that's how we want to learn. And, you got to be okay with making a different adaptation changes, because I had a big respects I give to, during undergrad, I put in a dyslexia center. So I got a bunch of help with learning more of, social skills and, getting tutoring with schoolwork. But then during my master's program, I think hit me hard is because my old advisor at the time, he tells me he thinks he has a form of ADHD. Okay, well, wait a minute. He's a professor. He looks very intimidating, but he's like one of the smartest people I've ever met at that time. So I was like, well, I can, I've been saying since high school, I want to get a PhD. And this kind of just makes me more of a point that, okay, it's possible. Like, he even tells me, if you, it might take me longer than the average person, but I'm going to get this because my mind is set on something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Again, if you're joining us here live with Ben Boudreaux, we want to say hi to Anetta, Paige, and Tracy. Thank you guys for joining us. Ben, when we were talking about exercise and you started talking about team sports, you said something, and I want to make clear and elaborate on this. Is you said something about exercise, or I think it was sport, and you said it hurts. Were you talking about it hurts to be put on the sideline, or physically it hurts you from the physical aspect of exercise when you were discussing in team sports or being in physical education?
I think both. It was both a physical thing of feeling like, oh, I'm fatigued. Like, is my heart rate really supposed to be beating this fast?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm losing energy, and is this normal? And then hurt, like I got no friends. Like, people kept telling me over and over that, finding a perfect friend is not going to exist. Well, a few years ago, I met my best friend, and we talk there every other day, and she's my best friend. And literally, I spent a wedding 3 weeks ago.
Mm. Awesome. Yeah, look, I've been blessed to have really good friends for a long time, and I do know what that means. And yeah, I think that's a good, again, a message to share with some other individuals that may be listening or reminding their parents is that their son or their daughter will one day maybe have a friend or a group of friends, and you don't need hundreds, right? You don't need 10.
No.
Sometimes one can make the difference.
I always tell people, like, the other thing that I do, like, I was taught in high school. One of my headmasters once told me, like, the thing he told me before one of my studies got published, he would say is two things you need to keep in mind. One, like I remember right leaving high school, he would say is sit in the front of the room, stick your foot out, and trip your teacher. Well, don't intentionally do that, but the message is basically get familiar with, develop networks, develop mentors, and, you'll meet people. Like, the one thing I always do is I'm fortunate to be around great people that understand who I am. So, having that network is beneficial. But then also he told me later on, a few years later, he says, the more you build yourself up, the more of a sacrifice is going to come over time. So I've learned that.
Yeah. So we've got about 9 more minutes. We can go a couple minutes over, but I want to elaborate on two other, or ask you a couple more questions. So, because this is one that I know I immediately asked you when we first met, when you talked about the physical pain of exercise.
Yeah.
One thing, I've worked with a lot of individuals. Some would be perceived as higher end of the spectrum, much like yourself, or some perceived as being on the lower end. So my question to you is, and to share with everyone, like I asked that day, is when you're exercising from the sensory integration standpoint, what are you feeling? Whether it's through swimming, I know you're a swimmer, weight training, cardiovascular, what can you share with parents and exercise professionals so we understand really, because quite frankly, even the researchers, right, they don't know, and especially if they don't have autism, they're just researching and analyzing kids and data and behaviors. But share with us that information. I think it's so critical.
So I exercise every day. Initially, I went through different phases of figuring out what actually works for me. So developing a routine immediately helps me. But then the big thing I'm for is cardio. I'm more of a cardio person. So when I wake up in the morning, I feel like I'm in a fog, like a complete mental fog. Like I can't focus. Like I'm going to be very anxious throughout the day. So go exercise. And then after I finish exercising, it reduces my some people will lose their stereotypical behavior. You can be more social. You won't say something that's kind of inappropriate at one time. But then also I notice is that, I've been progressing my intensity. So the one thing I always, a person with autism, without them, is think of it this way. I set a goal of a minimum of 30 minutes, some type of aerobic activity per day, just as a baseline, saying that's what you got to get. Anything beyond that is bonus.
Mm-hmm.
If I just did, like, say, resistance training, I will feel like, okay, I've done something, but I feel like, well, I didn't do too much. Like, I didn't feel like I got enough energy out. And then people warn me is, well, you're overtrained, you're in this overtraining principle, like this is dangerous. But then I find, well, I had not taken an exercise day off in, multiple years. So what does that, does that mean I'm different? Well, my heart rate, for instance, my friend, we joke about, it drops into the 30s and 40s.
Okay, so I want to, again, if you're just joining us again, this is Ben. He's a soon-to-be doctor of exercise, essentially, and on the spectrum. And I want to kind of put things into layman's terms for parents, especially. Okay, because I get what you're saying. You're talking about overtraining, the intensity and the heart rate and all that. I think what I'm trying to educate, and I know you too, Ben, is we just got to get those with autism moving, right?
Yeah.
To understand the benefits. So going back to my question of, so your method, what seems to calm you or help you is in the cardiovascular. When you say like resistance training or using free weights or dumbbells or things,
Mm-hmm.
did you not felt like, what did you feel from that, from a sensory integration standpoint? Did you feel anything? I
Like,
know
whenever
you.
I finish,
Yeah.
like when I finish completely exercising, I feel like a bunch of relief. Like, I feel the fog's going away. Like, I feel more focused. I'm able to be, mobile more. Like, I'm able to, like, instead of being like sedentary, but sitting down all day. So I'm more observant of that. But the thing I'm starting to do now is the amount of exercise I do is my sleep behaviors. So people with ASD and psychological issues have sleep pattern problems. But we know in research that you exercise a good bit, it improves your sleep. So, that's a good takeaway that, I always tell people with the research I'm in is this 24-hour cycle is that, if you're mobile a bit, you'll reduce your sitting time more and you'll be actually sleeping better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's great for parents and everyone to hear. Let me see what other questions I had. So swimming, I know that's what you did this morning. I know that's what you're doing. Is that your go-to then for the most part, swimming?
Right now it is because of the COVID-19
Sure.
situation. Like, before we were in lockdown, gyms were closed, and all I had to do, I'm used to running. Like, I'm a fast runner. Like, my best half marathon time is in an hour and 38 minutes.
Wow. Okay.
So, like, I think, these individual bike, swim, run, that helps, and then I'll even tell myself is, you got this other thing, that this resistance training, even though you don't like it, it's part of the guidelines. It's beneficial for you, at least do something with that. And, I tell people, I'm still doing machines. I do free weights.
Yeah.
Why do I feel intimidated doing free weights? Part of, and then the other part, well, that's not my main goal. My main goal is if I can stay more active. The main goal is just be mobile for 30 minutes, a minimum per day, is actually going to help you. Like, no matter who you are, because we know the benefits of being physically active, being exercise in a certain exercise intensity, and so forth.
So we got about 4 more minutes, but we have a question from someone. Her name is Alex from the National Center of Health, Physical Activity, and Disability, NCPAD. And so, Ben, she's asking, she's interested to know what interventions help you with social relationships. Maybe not exercise interventions, but what helped you along the way from your third grade, your official diagnosis of autism in
Yeah.
eighth? What was it for you that helped with that social interaction?
I think it's very interesting. I think, I've tried to make a lot of friendships along, throughout the way, but then I would know is like some would fail to understand, like, always make sure like that other person, like I would say is, okay, are you sure you're comfortable with, like I would tell, like, actually, I would tell my friends, like, if I'm doing much, let me know, or if I'm overworking, like making, I'm too needy. So learning from like maybe, what ways that, find people that are similar to you or different than you. Try not to be, the way I look at it is my friend, well, one other one is an MD.
Mhm.
And I found out that we have very similarities, but just from a different experience. So, and then how we formed our friendships that way.
So where did you form that friendship? Was it outside of class? Was it at a structured gathering or maybe the bowling alley? I mean, what was it for you that we started to form some of those relationships, or where?
It was actually, I was from working in different environments, meeting people, mutual people, and just saying like, just it couldn't hurt to see, just I've been told like during undergrad is what's the worst that can happen? Someone will tell
Right.
you no. Like, you got to be afraid of failure. I've had a major failure in my college career, but I've, rebounded from it. But I think, you can't be afraid of that. But then, it's going to be a challenge finding friends. It's difficult, but, trying to be, understand someone that can also understand that you're this, you struggle, socially, that, maybe they can actually teach you what, also improve your way in the way you don't know.
Ben, you're giving so much good information, and again, I really appreciate it. And here's what I think we're going to have to do. I want to stick to 30 minutes. I think what I'm going to do is we're gonna close up shop here per se, get some questions from people, and then have you come back, if not next week, the week after, because I don't want to disregard anything about your research of exercise and the importance of that and what you're doing. But before we come back, or we do meet again, um, what is a message for those with autism, maybe three, excuse me, inspirational, some message you want to give to someone with autism, a message to the parents, and excuse me, and a message to professionals working with this community? Go.
Okay. I would say with the autism community, learn to be, I always say embrace your uniqueness. Like, when I was young, I heard the phrase think different. I tell myself that every day. It's good to be different. Don't be intimidated. Be more, I think start, be more open. I think if we be more open, we can actually be aware of like, showing people that, hey, maybe we are different, but I hope you like what we do. Parents, I'd say more like, yeah, there's some things that, my parents had went into the phase of like, he's eating terrible. I've eaten fast food. I've eaten every dangerous food that, like the structure of a standardized diet. I'd play video games all the time. Well, some might take longer than others to develop. And if you find the one thing that you'll find with people with the ASD is they tend to have obsessions over certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Explore that with them. Like maybe ask questions about that, because maybe, with my expertise in measurement, like with technology, that's my, I could tell you I'm blue in the face about something, and that's where I'm trying to go with my career. So, be patient, It's going to work itself out. Some might take longer, but, be patient, be persistent, always ask questions. There's this area of research is always changing.
Mhm.
Professionals, I think, it's best to educate yourself on the matter, because I think, maybe, if a parent comes in, or even if you have someone, like, I'm curious more is how many people my age are on the spectrum.
Mhm.
Like, if they be open to it, like, how are you going to adapt? Like, maybe, learn about, like I had said with the parents, is learn a little bit about their uniqueness, and, that's something different. But then also, I think, find a way that makes it better. Meaning, like, if you find that, oh, it's better first.
Hey, Ben, I don't know if I cut you off right now. For some reason, I'm losing connection. So, hopefully, I didn't cut you off, and hopefully, this didn't end completely. So, I'm gonna sign off. I want to thank you. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Um, and maybe it was your end. Ben, are you there? You're on mute. You're on mute. Hey.
Yeah, somehow it just got randomly.
All right.
You got to love technology, right?
Yeah. Hey, so like I said, we're going to have you back. And again, I want to thank you for joining us. I thank you for your messages. And you're going to have an opportunity to say that again, because I think there's a lot more questions I have for you. And I'm hopefully between now and then, we'll get some people to email us some questions. So again, thank you all for joining us. Ben, we'll see you soon, and we'll talk to you soon. And thank you for sharing everything that you did. All right. We'll see you next time on Coach Dave Live. Appreciate it.